Today we've got about 2 hours really to take you through a range of materials that are designed to put you in the best position to apply for promotion, understanding that we now have a new promotion system. So the first part of the session today is really for me to take you through a little bit about the new promotion system, why we changed, and what was the rationale behind that. And that's really designed to give you a particular focus on how you might come about preparing your promotion application. So what were some of the things that we were mindful of, some of the issues that we were trying to resolve, to give you that perspective about what might the committee members be looking for in your application. So I'm going to talk that through. We also have a range of speakers here today, Professor Leslie Hughes, our PVC Research, Professor Mary-Alice Herberstein, the Chair of Academic Senate, and Professor Sherman Young, PVC students, PVC Learning and Teaching, who will talk us through some of the particular criteria, and so those areas of scholarship and how you might prepare your application. And Mariella will also share some insights, having sat on, I think, quite a lot of those Level D and E committees, about her experience of what committee members are looking for and how you can best put yourself forward in your promotion application. That's the plan. Having said that, we are very happy to take questions. So in some of these sessions in the past, there have been lots of questions. If there's something that you'd like to ask, please do so. It is intended to be quite an open forum. So really, if there are things that you'd like us to cover that are not on the list or specific questions, feel free to interrupt as we go. Let me just check our overview. A couple of other things that we will cover. Just a brief overview of what the evaluations were from the first round of academic promotions under this new system, a little bit about the success rates and some of the feedback that we've had and how that flows through into future rounds. And as I mentioned, time for questions and answers. This is also being video recorded, so if you'd like to watch it again, if today is not enough, you're welcome to watch the repeat. Or if you've got colleagues who you know are thinking about applying for promotion and really wanted to be here and are not able to do so, it will be available on the HR website for others to see. Okay, so first of all, I thought I might cover a little bit about the new academic promotion scheme, why we did it and what we were trying to achieve. And I'm going to go off script here a little bit, so bear with me if you would. So first of all, why did we do this? I guess a few reasons. First of all, and I've been here at the university now for about 3.5 years, one of the things that I consistently heard over my first couple of years here was around the difference between expectations for recruiting into an academic role and being promoted internally. So that the comment that I consistently heard is, Nicole, it is far easier for me to apply and be successful for an academic job at another university than it is for me to be promoted a new academic level within my current institution. And that just doesn't seem right. You know, that notion that it's easier for you to get a higher academic level by going to another institution rather than staying at Macquarie seems very counterintuitive. And that was everything down from the actual policy and criteria through to process. If you think just for a moment about process, if you're applying for an academic job elsewhere, you write a cover letter, you provide your CV, whereas here to apply for academic promotion, there were all of these detailed requirements, a sources of evidence folder, all of these kind of things to prepare that wouldn't align with a recruitment process. And so one of our goals going into this was to have a greater alignment between recruitment and how we recruit academic staff and promotion, so that the experience was more aligned and the standards and expectations were more aligned. So that was one of our first goals. The second thing was about how the existing criteria were actually working. And the feedback that I consistently had was that it was a very high bar and that it wasn't particularly transparent and that it didn't recognise the diversity and difference of academic careers. So to give you an example, we've been running sessions like this for quite a few years now, and one of the things that we had done was ask some people to come along who'd recently been promoted to talk through how they had applied and how they approached their promotion application. And I sat in the audience of a lot of those sessions and almost every single person started their session in a very similar way. And what they said was, I haven't had a particularly traditional academic career, so I don't know that I'm the best person to be speaking here, but, and on they kind of went. And I guess what that raised for me is there a traditional academic career? In the actual criteria, there seemed to be an expectation that everyone would be excellent in teaching, research and service. And yet what I was hearing was there are people who actually are very focused on one area or another who are still being promoted, even though the criteria at that time said to be promoted to professor, you had to be outstanding in research, teaching and service. And so there were some issues around transparency. If you had somebody who was in fact solely researching and not doing any teaching, but being promoted under that model, was that a true representation of what was in the policy and what was happening in practice? But also, were we recognising that different academics have different strengths and that, really we should be acknowledging and providing career paths for that? So a fundamental basis of why we did this was to recognise the diversity of different academic careers and different strengths, so that you might have some people who do both research and teaching in equal measure and feel that they want to apply in that way. But you might have people who are research focused or who are more focused on teaching or another area and wish to put forward an application focused on that. In addition to that, there was a sense that often you're asked to do work that doesn't fit into any of those criteria. So for example, increasingly there's a focus on things like impact. How do you connect with the outside world? How do you connect with industry? Those sorts of things. Increasingly there being expectation on the academic community to do work in that area, but then when people came to actually preparing their promotion application, not really seeing how they could put that in. And so it was squeezed into one of the other categories. And so really the whole premise of this new academic promotion model was to recognise the diversity of academic work and also that different people have different career pathways and different strengths, and that those might change over time. So for example, one of the things that we had thought about, a lot of other universities deal with this issue by saying, okay, you have different career pathways, we have a research and teaching promotion track, we have a research focused track, and we have a teaching focused track. The challenge with that being, some of the feedback we had when we were considering that option was, you might lock yourself into a particular pathway. And so part of the idea of this promotion application system is to actually acknowledge things like application and integration, which often are the bridges between those different areas, and recognise some of that breadth of academic work. So from all of that, where did we come to? We then sort of actually looked, and again, it's surprising that universities don't do this more often. It's surprising how rare it is for a university to actually look at academic work and scholarship in how it might organise its own activities. But what we did was we formed a group of academic colleagues, plus me, the non-academic colleague. So the three people who are presenting today, and Professor Patrick McNeil, who's the Executive Dean of Medicine and Health Sciences, came together and we turned to Boyer, Ernest Boyer, and the model of scholarship that you can now see this whole system is based on. And really the idea here was to acknowledge different areas of scholarship and also the importance of leadership and citizenship. And that was really the foundation of this new model. So I give you that background so that you know what we were trying to achieve. And hopefully that provides a little bit of direction for you as you prepare your promotion application about some of the things that we're looking for. And I'll give you some more insights there as we go through the next few slides. Before I do that, I just wanted to point out in terms of process, some key changes here as well. First of all, we previously had a system where it was either a faculty promotion committee or a university promotion committee. We have now moved to the more common FPC-UPC model, which is where everyone goes through a faculty promotion committee, and then there's also a university promotion committee for levels D and E. And you can see that represented in the slide there. There's also some changes from a process perspective. So things like the sources of evidence folder, which used to be required, was a sort of document where you compiled a lot of your evidence in support of your application. What you may not know was those folders were actually held in HR and members of the committee could come and look at them, which rarely happened. And so, part of this was thinking things like, well, if that's the case, why are we doing this? Let's actually think about, making this as easy and streamlined as possible for applicants, for each of you, but also for the committee members. And so part of this was we streamlined the application process. It's pretty straightforward now. You can include your own CV, so there's a free-form CV. You don't have to fit it under certain headings. We do give you some suggested headings for those of you who might like some guidance, and then you can upload some pieces of evidence. And really all of that is done electronically. It's fairly straightforward compared to the old process. Still, of course, a significant amount of time invested and very important, but we've tried to make the process more user-friendly. The other significant change is around interviews. So under the old system, there was not an interview for every applicant. Only some people were interviewed. The challenge with that model was the perception was that you were only interviewed if your case was borderline. And that became very, very stressful for the academic community. If you were called for interview, it was quite stressful. Under this new system, every applicant is interviewed at Faculty Promotion Committee level. I have to tell you, if there was one part of this new model that was controversial, that was it. The whole academic community was divided on that topic of should we have interviews for everybody. It was almost 50-50 in all of our feedback. As you know, we put this policy out to the whole university community for feedback. It went to Senate. We consulted with the Macquarie University Consultative Committee. We went to a whole range of places. In almost every forum, the community was divided on that topic. The rationale for why we wanted to do that was a few reasons. First of all, giving people different ways to communicate their achievements. Some people naturally feel more comfortable communicating in writing, others really want to speak to their work. So this is where it is a little bit different from an interview. If you think about when you've interviewed, if people really stuff up the interview, often that's held against them. It's less the case here. It's not an opportunity to test your presentation skills, it's an opportunity to speak to your work. So to actually communicate and add or give more explanation to what might be in your promotion documentation. Okay. We also appreciate that there might be differences for different people in how they prefer to communicate. Some of that might have a basis in gender. We've got some early evidence that indicates that could be the case. And so there's some ties here to what we're trying to achieve with our gender equity strategy as well. But also we want to give each of you an opportunity to actually connect with the people on the committee. And what has been interesting is in the evaluation and feedback that we've had, one of the major shifts from when we consulted about the policy to the first round is we've had very strong feedback, positive feedback about the interview process, that it actually has been a really valuable step. Both applicants and committee members have really appreciated it. One point of feedback that we did have was wanting more clarity about who is on the committee and how those interviews work, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. Most importantly, knowing that there are a number of people around the table. I think a few people were expecting a kind of informal chat. Often there's 7 people around the table, and like an interview, they take turns in asking you questions. And so being prepared for that and knowing that that's what you're going to be walking into. They are pretty friendly, so that doesn't mean it's a kind of a mean interview panel. It just has a level of formality to it. And the other thing to know is thinking about the new system, and I'll come to this in a moment, how are questions formulated, so I'll come back to that point. So very briefly, I think you've all seen this diagram, which is essentially how the new promotion system works. There are 5 areas of criteria, 4 based on Boyer's areas of scholarship, and then a 5th area around leadership and citizenship. The general principles here are to be promoted to level B or C, you need to achieve 8 points with a minimum point from leadership and citizenship. In each of those 5 areas, you can score a maximum of 3 points, and that relates to a level of achievement. So 1 point for achieved, 2 points for superior, and 3 points for outstanding. And so the committee actually assess you first of all based on your level of achievement. So their sort of ranking is around achieved, superior and outstanding, and then points are allocated based on that. One of the points of feedback we've had around the new promotion criteria is, can you give us better guidance on what you need to do to get an achieved, what you need to do to get a superior, and what you need to do to get an outstanding. We've tried to build that into the presentation today. So as my colleagues speak to the areas in each of the criteria, we've tried to give you some examples of how that might break down to give you some practical guidance here. It's very hard to do that as a policy because it's quite discipline specific. And so what might get you an achieved in one particular discipline, it might be radically different in another. So we've tried to give you some examples today in our presentation to help guide you through that. For promotion to D and E, there's a higher threshold, so a minimum of 9 points, and 2 of those must come from leadership and citizenship. So the idea here is you can create whatever mix you want to, provided you get to those 8 points for B and C or 9 points for D and E. The only requirements are you must have an outstanding in one area, so you must get a 3 in one of those 5 areas, and you must score for levels B and C at least 1 point from leadership and citizenship, or for D and E, 2 points from leadership and citizenship. That gives you some very clear indication of what we're trying to achieve here. Leadership and citizenship are really important as a criteria. So it's worthwhile putting a lot of effort into that part of your application. And in fact, when you see some of the results, one of the things that we noticed around application for promotion to level D was that was actually one of the standards that was more challenging to meet. Not across the other 4 criteria, but getting to that 2 in leadership and citizenship. So if you're considering applying to promotion for level D or E, that leadership and citizenship column is really important. Put some time, and again, we'll talk to that and give you some practical guidance on how that might work. Again, the notion here is you could have a whole range of different types of academic careers under this model. So you might have somebody who has quite even points between discovery and teaching, but you might have someone who really is focused on teaching and leadership, and then perhaps have some points in integration, or you might have someone who's really focused on research, who might even be research focused or research only, and be looking to score points in discovery, in application, perhaps in integration, and then in leadership and citizenship. There's a whole range of different options here, and we've intentionally made it non-prescriptive to give you that sort of opportunity to base this on your own career. Some of my colleagues are going to speak to those different criteria in detail. One of the points of feedback that we've had is, please help us understand better what integration and application are all about. That came through very strongly in our feedback, so we've put extra effort today into trying to describe those in a bit more detail. Very briefly, why Boyer? We've talked a little bit about this, really wanting to actually focus this in academic scholarship. And really, if you think about what Macquarie University is all about, really scholarship is at the core of what we do, whether it be teaching or research. The common focus here is scholarship. And again, in those areas of integration and application, those are founded in scholarship. So it really provided a strong anchor for what we were trying to do. We felt that it was a good model that recognised the complexity and diversity of what academics do, not fitting you into 3 different categories, but into 5. I appreciate we're still fitting things into boxes here, but it's 5, not 3. And also then wanting to provide different career pathways and the opportunity to move over time through those. So in summary, what we're trying to do, something that was strengths-based, a greater alignment between promotion and recruitment. I say that again just to give you an expectation going into this. That's a helpful mindset about what we were trying to do. So in preparing your promotion application, in thinking about the interview, that recruitment frame of mind is a helpful frame of mind, I think. Merit-based, acknowledging the diversity of academic work, acknowledging the flexibility of career pathways, We wanted to be more transparent. Again, one of the things that I found challenging with the existing model was the fact that what was written on paper wasn't always what seemed to actually happen. And so, for example, the one that we talked about, applying for promotion to professor, it says you need to be excellent across all areas, and yet someone who was research only and doing no teaching at all might still be promoted. That doesn't quite seem to match up. So what we try and do here might be a little bit more complicated on paper, but it is designed to be absolutely transparent. So it's much more flexible, and that should be clear from the actual documentation. We wanted to have a better experience for you as applicants and for people who sit on committees that's less cumbersome, and that we don't ask you for things that we're not going to use. So really what you provide is what the committees will actually see. And that's how they form their questions. So one of the things that came out about the interview process is, how do committees decide what they're going to ask me? And of course, as we operationalise this, we had to think about that question. We can't just give a committee a set number of questions or a set list of questions, because some people might be claiming points in discovery, other people might be claiming no points in discovery. So you can't just have a standard list of questions that everyone gets asked, and yet you don't want to have it completely open and unstructured, because we want to have a sense of consistency and fairness here. So let me be really open and transparent with you about how it works. What happens is committees get essentially a list of 10 questions, so 2 questions on each of the different criteria, and then they won't ask you 10 questions, they'll probably only ask you 4 or 5, and how they pick those questions depends on where you have claimed points. So if you've claimed 3 points in discovery, you can expect probably 2 or maybe 3 questions about discovery. They pick their questions based on where you have claimed points. They also might ask you questions to clarify something in your application. So, you mentioned here that you engaged in this particular outreach activity. Tell us a little bit more about that. Or, you've talked about a particular research opportunity. What was your role in that? How did that interact with this group here? So there might be points of clarification, but the main questions come from a list of 10. They're not publicly available, so just to let you know. But a list of 10 questions, they pick the questions that you get asked based on where you claim points. And there's more involvement from the faculty under this model, so every applicant goes to a faculty promotion committee. All right, I'm conscious of time, so I will keep moving. I wanted to give you a little bit of information about the outcomes of the first promotion round. We did have a higher volume of applications, so normally each year we have about 80 applications. We had 125 last year, which I think shows a good level of interest and engagement with this model. Some of the feedback that we had from people is there is a sense that people who previously may not have been recognised because of perhaps a difference in how their academic career had developed would be more included in this model. And so we had a higher number of applicants. And you can see the application numbers by level there as well. Again, given that we do have a strong focus on gender equity, we've also looked at this through a gender equity lens, and it's pleasing to see that there are higher application rates for women overall, and higher rates of women applying for promotion at level E. The success rates you can see there, overall a success rate of 78%. It does differ by level and it does differ by gender. So you can see those up on the screen there. One of the things that we're having a look at the moment is the dip in success rates at level D. That's an area of particular interest for us at the moment, and understanding that. Interestingly, it is the point where the standard for promotion goes from 1 point in leadership and citizenship to 2 points in leadership and citizenship. So again, worthwhile bearing that in mind as you prepare your application. We have also then surveyed, so we took a lot of data. Given this was our first round, we took a lot of data all the way through the process, but we also evaluated. So there was a survey of all applicants, all committee members, and we're going to publish some of that information so that you can actually see, and it's very transparent, what people liked, what people didn't. We think it's significantly improved based on that data. It is not perfect, so there are some areas that we continue to try and improve. But overall, the new model and criteria were very well received, and the scores were very positive there. The process was found to be more clear and streamlined. Interviews were received very positively. The point of feedback that we had was really about making sure that people understood it is a formal interview with a number of panel members and who's on that panel, rather than an informal chat, and how questions were formulated for those interviews. And that's why I talk about that today. We want to try and ensure that that's more publicly known. Areas for improvement and clarification: more guidance on application and integration, I have mentioned, and leadership and citizenship, and we've tried to include that in our presentation today. A link between how promotion criteria work and what the expectations are at a department and faculty level is something that we're still working through. The interview we've talked about. Outcome notification. One of our goals this year is to ensure that every person gets a phone call or an in-person notification rather than an email. So I'm being tough on our executive deans who chair those panels to ensure they do that. If they don't, come and tell me, please. Selection of referees. What you'll find is in the new system, there's not just senior referees, but there's also peer and junior referees. There have been some questions asked about how much focus is actually placed on junior and peer referees. The committee feedback was actually that was very helpful, particularly when it comes to assessing leadership and citizenship. So we're going to continue with that. More guidance on how to assess levels of achievement we've built into our presentation today, and then timing. And what I'll show you in a moment is we've tried to have a slightly more expanded range of dates. So one of the things we did last year for the first time was had one round and one date for application. That was actually quite popular. We were planning to split the round, and people said, no, please don't do that. So I'll show you the dates in a moment. They've been on our website for a long time, but I will reiterate them today. So what does that mean? There's no changes to policy, procedure or criteria this year. There's no change to forms, templates, referee requirements or application process. So hopefully a lot of you are fair way down your document. Rest assured, those haven't changed. You don't have to cut and paste anything. Our information sessions we're trying to use to clarify where there were requests for additional information. Our process is, again, we're continuing to improve that with committees, and the timeframes are as they appear now. So the date for lodgement is the 1st of June, is the date when your promotion application needs to be in. You should aim to have your document to your head of department by the 3rd of April, and the head of department then prepares a report. That then comes back to the executive dean, and you get to see that before it is submitted. Okay, so if you would like to make some changes, there's an opportunity to do that. But really the core date for you at the moment is the 3rd of April, that you should have your promotion application to your head of department in order that you can have it lodged on the 1st of June. Then you'll see there's promotion committees scheduled from September to December, and then the effective promotion date is the 1st of January next year. So I'm happy to take any questions about either how we came up with the new promotion criteria, how they work, any of the kind of clarification points on process, last year's round, any questions you might have. Yes?
To me, the women's level of promotion at lecturer D stands out very boldly in that set of figures, and I wonder about the way leadership is defined in the criteria and whether women's leadership activities are being recognised as leadership activities, and whether that will be addressed in whether there's a review of the criteria.
Yeah, look, good question. I mean, I think, as one of the people chairing the gender equity strategy, that worries me too. Clearly it's a key point of crossover in our scissor graph, and so it's something that we're looking into in detail at the moment. And part of it is actually understanding the experience of people who applied at that level. We'll be looking very carefully this year as well.
We could also add that the numbers at that level are quite small.
Very small.
So, there's a bit of a small number problem to get too carried away with that index.
Yeah, but I do, what's interesting just from a gender equity perspective, I mean, I share your concerns about how we actually look at achievement, but also how we give opportunities to communicate achievement. What was pleasing to see is that by including interviews as standard, the actual scores for women improved after interview. Not by a huge amount, but by an amount. So I think there is something around how we discuss and communicate achievements around leadership. Yeah. Nikki.
Just in terms of the process, Nicole, so we get the application to our cogs by the 3rd of April.
Yes.
And then the official submission is until the 1st of June. Is there an opportunity if you have further achievements in that time to alter the application?
There is. So what happens is you lodge your application with your head of department. They then write their report, which is a report and it goes to the Dean. It comes back to you. So let me check with Catherine. Does it come back after the Dean has seen it or before the Dean has seen it? After the Dean has seen it. So you get to, and I think then in fact you then lodge it. So if there are things, you have an opportunity to make comments about the head of department report if you don't agree or if you want to add some points of clarification. And if you've had additional achievements since then, you can include them. Often the first question at interview is also, is there anything that's happened since you applied that you'd like to talk to? So even if something happens, I mean, the timeframes here are quite long. So, you know, if something happens between lodging and when you're interviewed, absolutely raise it. And if they don't ask you, say, look, one of the things I'd like to mention is something significant has happened between when I lodged and now. Yeah. Yes?
Nicola, my question is about referees, about how do you define a peer? So let's say now your strength is in the scholarship application and the person who would speak to that would be an industry partner.
Yes.
Would that be someone you would define as a peer?
Absolutely. So if you wanted to include an industry partner as one of your referees, that would be fantastic. Yes.
So this goes back to the question before that one. If in the period between lodging your application and the rest of it, something significant enough happened that you would be looking to apply to the next level again, would you be able to make that change?
Ooh, now that's a good question. All right, let me go back to the theory of the policy here and then I'll try and apply it. So the theory of the policy is, technically you should apply for promotion to the next level from your current level. You can seek permission to apply for promotion an additional level up with a special permission. And normally you get that before you lodge your application. And so that's one of the things that we've tried to make clearer. We've separated out getting special permission and then the substantive promotion application, because what we were finding was otherwise the sort of promotion committee got together and they didn't know if they were considering the request for special consideration or the substantive application. So we've now separated those out. How that would apply when you've already lodged your application, to me that would be an unusual circumstance, and I would say call me and we'll work it through. And I'd probably, to be honest, I'd probably then talk to the two people who do those special considerations with me. So the kind of group that considers those special considerations are the DVC academic, the DVC research, and me as the Director of HR. So we'd probably convene and give you an answer about would we send your application to the next level up or to the current level that you'd applied for. But we'd make it clear so that you knew which you were going for. Yes?
If you were hired at the last level before the job, does the 2-year eligibility of work still stand?
So again, that's something that you can apply for special consideration for. So the general principle is you're 2 years at one level. If you wanted to fast track that, you can apply for special consideration. You get that special consideration in advance. You need to get your approval and then you can lodge earlier than the 2 years. Okay. Yes?
I have a question about peer referee. Is there a preference about whether it should be a fellow Macquarie person? If it's a fellow Macquarie person, could that person just be one step above you but still be a peer?
Look, they could. There's no preference about whether or not a peer could be inside Macquarie or really somewhere else. The idea is really to get that peer or junior feedback. So anyone who you think falls into that category, there's no sort of tight constraints around that. Yeah. Yes, up the back there. Yes. Good question. Do you go high or do you go low in your self-assessment? Look, that's a very good question. I wouldn't undersell yourself, but also be realistic. I would do an accurate assessment of what you think you should be claiming. What I can say is there are circumstances where the committee has gone lower than self-assessment. There are also circumstances where they've gone higher. So if the committee thinks that you've underdone your application, they can give you a higher score. I also normally at times like this go back to the data. What the data tells us is that when we had a look at the whole round, people generally self-assessed at a higher level to what the committee assessed themselves as. So in the last round, the tendency was to rate yourself a little bit higher than the committee came in at, and there were gender differences there. So the gap between self-assessment and committee assessment was smaller for women than it was for men. There was a bigger gap for men. It's just what the data says. I make no comment. Okay, maybe a last question and then I'll hand over to Leslie. Yes. Good question. So what's the deadline for your referee reports? You don't need to get your referees. You just give us the names. And then one of the reasons why there's quite a big gap in the time frame is that we organise the referees. So what happens is we send them a form that they have to fill out. And one of the benefits of that is we found under the old system, having a free-form referee, what your referee said, sometimes there were lots of different, they were wonderfully, tremendously, brilliantly good, versus they're wonderfully good. And you think, only wonderfully good versus, And so they're quite set questions that we ask referees, and so it's designed to be a more neutral form of assessment by referees. So just to clarify, you just give us the names and then we actually go and get the referees. Catherine McDonald coordinates that. It is a mammoth task, and that's one of the reasons why we need a bit of time from when you lodge to when the committees actually meet. Okay, last question, then I might hand over to Leslie. Yes?
Are we able to know what that form contains, like what sort of things the referees are asked?
No, it's super secret, so that you can't then say, right, they're going to ask you this. Look, it's not designed to be, we try and make this as transparent as possible to give you a sense. The sorts of things that they're asked are, how do you know this person? How do you sort of form the basis to make an assessment? We ask them to make an assessment about your overall strengths and then comment on your application in various areas. So it's not anything sinister, but we do ask them specific questions like that. So, for example, if you name someone that you met at a conference one day but they're fantastic and they don't know you, that question about how do you know with this person, if they say, I once met them at a conference but otherwise I don't know them or have had any dealings with them, that would come out in the application, yeah. Yes?
Yeah. Do the referee reports come in before the head of department does his or her report? So
No.
they only go to the committee and the head of department doesn't see them?
I think that just the head of department doesn't see the referee reports, no. All right, I'm going to ask Leslie to hand over and then I'm happy to take more questions at the end.